This may just look like an old armoire, but I saw something worth saving. For me, every piece has a story, and this one was ready for a new chapter. I found this armoire on Facebook Marketplace. It had been sitting in storage for years. I'd seen a few armoire makeovers online and thought, why not try one myself? I wanted to turn it into something beautiful. Hi, I'm Jacqueline. Welcome to my channel. I decided to use CitriStrip to remove the old varnish from the frame and the sides of the armoire. I let the CitriStrip do its magic for a few hours, and then I used a putty knife to scrape away the residue. To remove the remaining residue, I used Wise Owl GreenEZ Stripping Clean. I sprayed it on the cabinet, and then I used a non-abrasive pad to scrub it off. And then I gave it a good rinse with some clean water. Once the wood was completely dried, I was pretty happy with the result, and this is what it looked like. To remove the stain from the drawers and the cabinet doors, I decided to go with the Wise Owl GreenEZ Stripping Clean, the full strength. After a few hours, I once again used a putty knife, followed by the watered down version of the Stripping Clean, and then I rinsed with water. It was time to start sanding, and I used my DeWalt sander on the drawers as well as the cabinet. I started with 80 grit, then I went to 120, and then the last grit was 180. And I was pleasantly surprised when this was all done that a lot of the scratches had disappeared. For the 3 top drawers, it was easy to remove the bottom of the drawer so I could refinish them. As you can see, the finish was very thin, so I thought that I would be able to simply use my sander to remove the finish. Boy, was I wrong. There was such a cloud of dust, but it felt like glass. I was thankful that I had my respiratory mask on. Needless to say, I decided to abandon that and use my carbide scraper to finish the job. Some areas still needed some wood filler, and I used a Bondo, which is a 2-step process. I mixed the filler with the cream hardener and then spread it over the areas that needed it. Once the Bondo was completely dry, I then sanded it down. Since I'm not the tallest person, I decided to remove the top of the armoire. It was easy to remove, and it was easier for me to work on, which you'll see later on in the video. This is a view of the inside of the cabinet, and as you can see, it is in pretty good shape. And I had cleaned it very well with Simple Green. Several of the drawers needed some repairs, so I used some wood glue, some syringes, and some clamps. So here I'm using Wise Owl Gray Primer, and I'm also going to be using this primer on the frame of the cabinet as well as the 3 top drawers. This is my inspiration board. I knew that I wanted to use the Redesign with Prima Anthurium Decor Transfer I wanted to use green and have new handles and a paint wash. The first color I'm going to use is Newell from Fusion Mineral Paint. I will be painting all the surfaces that I have primed, but before I painted, I used a fine sanding sponge and then wiped off the residue. I wanted to show you what I did to fill the holes on the legs after I removed the casters. So I removed the cylinders. Then I filled the hole with some wood glue. And then I used a wooden dowel and inserted it into the hole and used a hammer to get it in as much as I could. And then I used my sander to smooth it out. And the last piece was to nail in a furniture glide. And by the way, I learned this trick from watching John's Furniture Repair. I am now going to be mixing Algonquin with Victorian lace. This color is going to be part of my paint wash, but it's also going to be the base coat for the 3 top drawers. So I have 1 part Algonquin and about 2 parts Victorian lace. I'm starting the paint wash on the bottom 2 drawers. So the first thing I do is I mist the drawer with some water. And then I apply the watered down paint with a brush, and I'm going to be painting in a couple of directions just to get that paint worked into the wood. And then I will wipe away the excess. I will let it dry, and then I will repeat the process. Before applying the second coat of the paint wash, I used a sanding sponge and then I wiped away the residue, and then I proceeded with the second paint wash. Here is a quick time lapse of the paint wash on this side of the armoire and a peek of the completed drawers. Now for some fun. At first, I'm going to base coat the top drawers with the mix that I made of Algonquin and Victorian lace. The first color we're going to use is Newell, and we are going to do a crumbled paper art on top of the drawers. I have taken a piece of brown paper and crumpled it, and I'm going to dip it into the paint. And then I'm going to dab it basically onto the surface. It's kind of like a stippling effect, or perhaps you know it as a rag effect, but this time I'm using crumpled paper. And this is the first layer on these drawers. I will let this first layer dry and then on to the next layer. I use press-in seal and a rubber brayer, and I added some of the press-in seal onto the brayer. This will give me some extra texture, and I'm applying golden ticket. I'm going to pour some golden ticket in a plate, roll my brayer into the paint, and then roll my brayer onto the drawer as well as the side of the drawer. Here is a closer look. I applied a stain and finishing oil to the top after I had applied a coat of Newell, and this is the result. It was time to put everything back together again. Thanks to my husband. For the inside of the drawers, I decided to go with the Howard's Feed-In Wax. The drawers were very dry, and I was so pleased with the result. This was the before. Such a big difference. I also applied the Howard's Feed-In Wax to the back of the armoire since it was so dry. And I also did the inside of the cabinet, and it made a big difference. And now for the star of the show. This is the Anthurium Decor Transfer by Redesign with Prima. I've had it for a couple of years, and I was just waiting for the right piece to use it on. This transfer comes in 3 separate parts, which fit into each other. This transfer was perfect for this armoire. I had to work around 2 doors, which has a raised lip, part of the frame, which has grooves in it, and a drawer. It was tricky, but with patience, I was able to get it done. You will see that I switch back and forth between using a transfer tool and a wood burnishing stick to rub on the transfer. And at some point, I actually use my nails for the tight areas. At this point, I'm going to cut the transfer with my utility knife, following the guidelines on the transfer. And you'll notice that the lip of the cabinet door is to the right. I am using the backing of the transfer in order to burnish the transfer. By burnishing, you remove the adhesive halo. A soft cloth, a burnishing pad, or your fingers can also be used. For the second part of the decor transfer, I decided to cut the center following the guidelines, as this is the most tricky part because I have to apply the transfer on 2 cabinet doors that has one of them has a lip, as well as part of the cabinet frame and a drawer. So it'll just make it easier for me to position everything. After the 2 panels, this is what it looked like. And I have to say, my arm was getting pretty tired. All done, and I'm pretty pleased as to how it turned out. This old armoire may have been forgotten in a storage unit, but today it's got a whole new story. If you enjoyed this transformation, I'd love it if you would give it a thumbs up and maybe even subscribe for more projects like this one. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.